Hello again. Gary Stearman. Time for another Prophecy in the News daily update. It's the 4th of October, and we are making this for release on Friday the 5th, and that's when you'll be watching it through the weekend. I've got a special guest. I shouldn't call him a special guest. He's our Director of Operations here at Prophecy in the News, Bob Ulrich. And so we can sit and have a relaxed conversation. Good to have you here today.
It's good to be here. I prefer the title, Guy with a lot of books on his desk.
Yeah, a guy with a stack of books on his desk. And among those books are a couple books we're going to be talking about today. One of the things we do here at Prophecy in the News is bring you publications that are designed to enhance your knowledge of Bible prophecy and of the Bible in general. And we have an offering for you today that I think you're really going to enjoy. Stephen Quayle, one of the greatest researchers of our day, has written a book on angels.
Well, he has a book called Angel Wars, and you need big muscles to hold this book up. It's a heavy 400-plus page, well constructed and made book. But I have a confession to make. Angel Wars has probably been out now for, 2 or 3 years since it's been in our magazine for that long. I wish I could tell you the truth and tell you that I read every word of every book that ever goes in our magazine, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Right.
Angel Wars, I leafed through it. I looked at it. It looked incredible. But I didn't read the whole book word for word. I wanted to, but 400 pages requires a lot of time. Well, last night I read the first 6 chapters of Angel Wars completely, and we just finished up a weekly television program on it, and I just got to say, this is one of the most incredible books I've ever seen. The Bible almost on the subject of giants and the Nephilim and the fallen angels.
As a writer, researcher myself, when I see the work of someone else, I can recognize hard work and talent. And Stephen Quayle is one of the best researchers I've ever seen. He goes places and gets little tidbits that nobody else gets. Now, you want the complete story of the fallen angels, the giants of the old days that are spoken of in the Old Testament of the Bible. You want the whole story behind the ruination of this planet and the subsequent redemption of the planet through Christ. I think Steve Quayle has put it together in an amazing way.
You can't really understand the Bible unless you understand the 6th chapter of Genesis and the things that actually happened and the chaos that infiltrated heaven with the fall of Lucifer, with the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and then that intention of corrupting the human genome of mankind as an attempt to corrupt the potential genome of Christ moving forward in history.
You know, Bob, there's been a conspiracy to cover up this story. And it's been covered in the evolutionary model. That is to say, if you ask a little school kid today, or maybe a teenager who's been brought up through the grades in public schools, tell me the history of mankind. Well, he's going to say, a long time ago, man was a primitive creature who lived in caves. And one day, after a lightning storm, he discovered fire, and he learned to build fire, and he went out and he hunted animals and he killed them. And he made animal skins to cover himself, He started out as a little critter that looked something like a monkey, and then as the millennia rolled by, he got taller and taller and shed his hair and began to look more and more like us, and finally, presto, here's humanity. Well, that's the story right now. It's a lie. And it's the cover-up that's being used to conceal the actual story, which Steve Quayle does a wonderful job of bringing to life.
Well, he has a whole chapter in here on the Smithsonian. And all I can say is you got to read it to believe it.
That's worth the price right there.
Things that once were are no longer anywhere to be found.
That's right.
Now, you told me a story before we went on the set today that you have to repeat, because I know that the people who are watching here know that you're a man of great credibility and you don't make things up. Even that UFO encounter you had, I suspect, is probably real.
Well, you're right.
But I want you to tell the story, because there has been a great cover-up throughout history in the world of archaeology. People who find things and then suddenly someone shows up at the door. The black limousines.
Sure.
And the black sunglasses, and those artifacts are either absconded, they're purchased, they disappear forever, into antiquity. And so tell that story, because it really fascinated me.
Well, and it goes along with what's in Steve's book, because he talks about the Grand Canyon area and some discoveries there that were covered up. Discoveries of giants, including red-headed giants, by the way, who preceded the Indian tribes of North America. But that's another story. I once knew a circuit preacher who would travel in his car, preach in various places. This man was ultimately credible as far as I'm concerned, and was an old-time gospel preacher. He was preaching in Arizona. And he came back from that trip and told me many, many years ago about an exhibit that he'd seen in a small museum in Arizona, which featured the mummified remains of a woman. And he looked at me and he said, "Gary, she was a giant. She was kneeling in the kneeling position, mummified, and so beautifully mummified that she almost looked alive," he said. And in the kneeling position, she was 6 feet tall. And he said, it blew me away. Well, the end of the story is that years later, that mummy disappeared. And my friend, the circuit preacher, had called the museum, and they said, "Well, we don't have that exhibit anymore. We don't even know where it's gone." And they didn't want to talk to him about it. And it's nowhere to be found today. And this is the story of much of the ancient memorabilia, many of the ancient artifacts that were once visible, they're now hidden.
Well, Steve has a great story in here about an excavation into the Grand Canyon in 1909. It was in the Phoenix Gazette. It was a front page story of what they found. Found caves with literally things that came out of the ancient past. And the strange thing is, the people in the caves were Orientals. And here they are in the Grand Canyon with fully developed copper axes, far beyond the technology we would expect them to have. And he details all the things they found in these caves, which were expansive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, huge. We don't hear about that today.
That's right.
Now, it's funny, I took a long weekend last weekend and drove my family to Colorado. And on the way to Colorado, I went through New Mexico, and I saw this sign that just grabbed my attention. And I picked up my phone and I called you and I said, "Gary, I'm in Chaco Canyon." And of course, Chaco Canyon, as Steve highlights in his Angel Wars book, also has another name, Cannibal Canyon. And here they've actually tested materials that they've found from people in the canyon, and they've discovered that the people that live there were cannibals. Human protein, found in the mixtures.
Now, here's the interesting thing. Steve shatters a lot of 20th century, 21st century mythology with well-documented history. And he does it from a biblical perspective. This is the thing that I'm most interested in. We're talking about the true story of man's creation, his fall, his corruption by fallen angels. This story needs to be told because it absolutely shatters the myth of the caveman and the myth of an upward evolutionary spiral that has so captivated modern man.
Well, it does, and in fact, I know most of you have this book. Look at this cover. This has to go down in history as maybe the greatest book cover ever. You take a look at this and the pictures inside, and the average person in church today literally knows nothing about the 6th chapter of Genesis or the reference in the book of Jude.
Yeah.
The angels who kept not their first estate. This was an attempt to corrupt the DNA and the bloodline of Jesus Christ and prevent him from becoming the Messiah, to pollute his bloodline with an alien mutant DNA. You've seen this in the magazine. It's $39.95. You've seen Angel Wars in the magazine. It's also $39.95. We've got a special that we're running on television. If you order both of those books, if you don't have them, we're also going to include Robert Fade's book, A Scientific Approach to Biblical Mysteries. He gets into giants in this book. He gets into the Star of Bethlehem. And what we discover is that science supports the Bible.
Absolutely.
And the Bible supports science. They're not that far apart. So the offer, if you buy each book individually, Giants, Angel Wars, $39.95 each, both of them for $79.90. If you do buy them both, here's your free bonus, A Scientific Approach to Biblical Mysteries. Anyway, it's a fascinating subject, isn't it?
It is, and I wish we had more time to talk about it. We wish you well. Keep watching. The world is basically on fire today. Prophecy is being fulfilled in little bits and pieces. If you're watching, you're going to see some amazing things. And take advantage of these books because they will give you a broader perspective of what's in your Bible. Bob, been good talking to you.
Looking forward to the future.
Me too. Gary Stearman. Keep looking up, everybody.